Come with us on a journey into the unknown, the unexplained, and the unbelievable. We will test your senses and challenge your beliefs. A world where science and religion clash. Or do they? You will meet real people and hear real stories, but you will not believe. You will witness strange sights and hear strange sounds, but you will not believe. This is the New England Ghost Project. Welcome to the nightmare.
Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Ghost Chronicles Next Generation. I am your host, Anne Kerrigan, also known as the Blonde Bombshell. My co-host, Ron Kolek, unfortunately couldn't be here tonight, but I promise you he'll be back in his wing chair on the next show. So Ron and I discussed what I should talk about tonight and decided that we wanted to share a little bit of this past year's SpiritQuest event. Now in its 8th year, SpiritQuest is like no other Paracon. It's an interactive, hands-on experience dealing with a specific topic, featuring a multitude of speakers. In 2018, we had British ghost hunter, author, and father of parascience, Steve Parsons, Dylan Jones of the Great British Ghost Hunt, and America's favorite paranormal author, investigator, and overall fun guy, Jeff Belanger, as our featured speakers. In the first half of today's episode, we'll bring you an impromptu paranormal panel comprised of Ron Kolek, Jeff Belanger, and Steve Parsons. One of our planned speakers had a flat tire on the way to the event, so we had an informal Q&A session where the audience could pick the brains of the seasoned investigators. In the second half of the show, you'll hear a presentation by Joe Cambria and Greg Berghorn from NEUFORC, the New England UFO Reporting Center. This is a topic we rarely cover on Ghost Chronicles, and Joe and Greg gave a very interesting talk on the subject that I found fascinating. So let's start our selections from SpiritQuest 2018. Enjoy.
What is your favorite ghost encounter experience and why?
You're the most famous.
So, I was, when I started in all this, I was a newspaper reporter, and I didn't disbelieve in ghosts, but I didn't really have my own experience yet, either. That didn't come until 2003, when I was in the catacombs of Paris, and as I was below the city, I was alone, and the catacombs are filled with just millions of human skeletons that have been moved down there between the mid-1700s to 1800s. And as I'm walking down this long hallway, I see this shadow the size of a man that moved from one side to the other and back. And I just froze, and I went, oh my God, like this, and my brain's going through, like, well, what could it be? And then, like, the tunnel was narrow enough that no one got by me, there was no side tunnels. And at that moment, I went, this is what everyone's talking about. I have no word for what I saw other than ghost. And I've had a few experiences since. In 20 years of doing this, I can count really on like one hand how many times I can say, I got no word for that other than paranormal. But that was the first time. And I went, wow, I think I just lost some objectivity. I think I have to call myself a believer. And I still try to remain skeptical and objective in everything that I do. But I've had some experiences that I can't explain with any other word, and that was the first. And I'll never forget it.
For me, I've spent 40 years looking for ghosts. I think it comes, for me, to one incident that took place in... I discounted an earlier incident because I was alone. But on this second occasion, myself and a colleague were working for the BBC. And we were at the shipyard on the banks of the River Mersey, which we spent 3 years looking at. And this was a building that we knew in depth. We had names for every brick and tile in the wall. We'd been there that long. And the BBC had its Halloween season, and they want to do a short 10-minute feature about the ghosts of the shipyard. And they sent a cameraman reporter, a two-person team along with us for the night. And we knew nothing was going to happen. And they arrived at dusk, and towards dawn, about an hour before dawn, nothing had happened, and we decided to call it a night and go home. And then they were just going to make a story about the other accounts. And that's the last thing that we had to do, because we'd been there 3 years, we had the keys. And it's quite a responsibility to be given the keys to the shipyard. And it was quite an honour. And so we took a great deal of care of. The last thing that we used to do was they put the camera stuff in the thing, the recorder started to get ready to leave, and myself and Anne went back to lock the building. And as we locked up, we looked, just to give it a, and there was a light on the first floor, second floor, you Americans, the first floor in Britain. Upstairs, there was a light on above us. And we thought, we've left the lights on, we better nip in and turn the light. And as we looked, the light went off. And another light came on about 5 windows up. Now that room is one very long, open plan, technical drawing office for the shipyard, or was technical shipyard. So we thought, somebody's got in. We had the key, but somebody's broken in. We'll have to go and. So we rushed back in. Went upstairs. We could hear a door close, and what sounded like movement. We thought, clearly somebody in. We went up onto that floor and opened the office doors to go into this room. And along the ceiling are strip lights with pull cords, individual string cords that the draftsman who did the technical drawings for the ships would sit in. They needed lights. And we saw 2 panels go on and 3 go off. And we heard the clicks. And then the doors at the far end, so about 70 feet away, we saw one of them swing. Now, the building is like an elongated rectangle of corridors, so my colleague Anne went one way, I went the other way, because we would have to meet. There was no other way in and out apart from this one stairwell up and down and this rectangle. And we met at the far end. There was nobody there. And as we started to walk back, there was the door that we had just come through swung open and closed one more time. And all of the lights on that floor went out. As we turned to go down the stairs, we heard a noise behind us, turn around, as a BBC camera suddenly appeared, rushing up the stairs, breathless, and a reporter, I remember, she said, "Is that a ghost?" And I turned on, "Oh, we didn't broadcast that bit. We did, obviously we didn't, as I said, we didn't know. And we then spent 3 months looking at was it the electrics of the building? We spoke to the person who designed the electrics of the building. We pulled the plans for the wiring diagrams for the building and discovered that the only way to turn those panels on and off was the string. There was no master switch anywhere. So there was no building, the electrics for the building, there was no isolator switches. The only way those panels could be turned on and off was the pull. Wow. So that to me had me questioning.
So I've had paranormal experiences. I have seen what I believe were full-body ghosts, but not, oddly enough, not well investigated in everyday life. While doing ghost tours, I remember one case, I saw a woman go by, and I had to wait for her because she was outside the place, and I waited for her to come in, and I saw her walk all the way over to the door. There were some of our volunteers out there, and she never came in. I finally said, because I had stopped right in the middle, I said, I was waiting for her because I wasn't going to repeat myself. That's what I'm sure. So finally, there was no one there, but I saw it clear as day, enough to stop what I was talking about. There was another time I was working on it was after a ghost hunt up at Wood Island, and I was having coffee on a Sunday morning with one of the directors out there, and I looked at the kitchen, and I saw a dog, as clear as can here, go across the door. Never heard anything. You know how dogs make sounds? No sounds. I jumped up, ran out to there. There was no dog. I came back. The person I was with, well, can you describe the dog? Sure, it's clear as day. I described the dog. She told me a story. There was a lighthouse keeper out there who had a dog, as the dog I described. And it was time for the lighthouse keeper to leave the island. The dog wouldn't go. So he stayed on the island, and every lighthouse keeper took after him until he died out there. Now, can I say that was the dog? No. But I saw something that I believe was a dog as clear as day. And these are my experiences. So whether you believe it or not, it's up to you. But that's what I experienced and believed in. Now, all these things, right, that have happened to me, and there's been a lot of them, because I explore the paranormal more than anybody. A lot of people will think all mediums are crazy or crap or whatever, which, I thought they were all gypsies when I first started. But in order for me to try to understand them, you have to partake in it. and try to understand it. If you can have that experience, what is going on? So all these things that happen, the bottom line is, can I tell you they're all ghosts, they're all paranormal? No, I cannot. And I don't think I'll ever be able to.
She asked your favorite paranormal experience, and
Thank you.
what you meant to say was the time I called you.
Yeah, you know what? I
Here's
bet
how
you
it
have
started. No, I'll tell you how it started. He's about to light up. Ready? It started with an email I got from Lloyd Auerbach, who's a parapsychologist based on the West Coast, and the subject was, "You owe me." And it had attachments, and he said, "There's this haunted place in Quincy, Mass, which I know is out near you, Jeff, and you might want to look into it. This person sent me these videos, and there's these orb things flying around. This person runs a business, and she teaches pole dancing." So I watched the video, and I said, "There's the things, these like white orbs right in the camera." And I said, "Ron, you want to go investigate this thing?" He's like, he's like,
Yeah.
"A damsel in distress, we're on our way." So we go to the pole dancing studio, and I brought my neighbor who works for a company that makes equipment that measures everything in environment, from dust particles to moisture to everything else. He's like, I need to help. And I said, "Of course." We're gonna need to call out all the tricks. Need to help. So we all go out there, and we set up like thousands of dollars worth of gear. We've got, cameras, we've got different things. And so there's this awkward long pause, and we're like, "So this ghost only appears while you're dancing, right?" "So you should probably go ahead and dance." And she's like, "Okay, yeah, no problem." She was ready to go. So she's dancing and twirling around, and then we were all watching, and I ran out of singles and like.
And Ron's meter went off in his pocket.
Wait a minute, I do want to mention one other thing too.
Hey.
Yeah, you were there.
Maureen Wood was there too.
Yeah, but
So
we're
one of the
talking
first things she asked her
That's
was,
honest.
"Maureen, do you want a costume?"
Yeah. No.
However, this was not a wasted trip at all.
No.
Because she taught Jeff how to pick up $20 bills with his butt cheeks.
All right.
Dentist skill.
It doesn't work on singles. So what we found was
25s and better.
she would place her camera right outside of a doorway aiming into the studio. And so my next door neighbor, Rob, who brought all the other gear, he put his hand up on the door frame just to rest. And it knocked a little bit of dust down that came down right in front of the camera lens. And as she's twirling around, it's like a big fan, and the dust would go like an inch from the lens. And we looked down, and we were just like, and Rob's like, "Look, that's exactly what's in the videos." And I was like, "Shh, stop."
You have to go through the full scientific process here.
We've only been here 10 minutes, Rob. We have to be thorough. So, it was really interesting. It was the whole thing was amazing.
That being said, though, there was one piece of video that I did see where this black thing went across the camera just like that, which was cool.
Yeah, it was a little different.
Supposedly she was, alone, but I mean, we can only take the witnesses.
Right.
Right, Steve? I mean, we believe the witnesses until we don't.
We absolutely, it's the only piece of information that we have to go on. Because when the phone rings and they say to you, "I've got a ghost, I've seen a ghost, I've had this," you're like a detective. And if you have to take what they say at face value, and then work from that position into the investigation. And the first thing that you do after you hear it is like, where were they? What were they doing? And you try to take, you're not debunking, but you have to take the story apart a little bit to try and understand, could they have seen what they saw? Did this happen in that sequence? Are there any other witnesses? What was it like, what was the conditions like at the time? To disbelieve the witness just because it sounds fantastical or implausible, it means that you will never satisfactorily undertake an investigation.
One of the problems too I found with witnesses is over time, and I heard you guys talking about this with UFO cases, their story will change, and that's a natural part of human storytelling. If you get to them early, right, like this happened last night, that's as good as you're going to get, because the more they tell it, two things happen. One is that people might start leaning in, going, "So it's coming down the stairs," and suddenly there's this man at the top of the stairs, and people go, really? And you don't mean to embellish, you don't mean to lie, but we're natural storytellers, and we start to focus on that part of the story, and he was this, and we start to, and the story will change. Or the other thing that can happen is that they suddenly dismiss this thing that was very real to them, but they've told it a few times, maybe they got laughed at.
The next morning syndrome.
Right, and suddenly they're like, I don't really want to talk about this anymore. You know what, I think I was mistaken.
That happens actually very, very quickly.
Yeah.
We have a process for our team, because our team are witnesses, and we have them keep a diary of while they're there. And it's just what we basically say to them is we want you, everybody understands the concept of tweet nowadays, so a little short one line.
140 characters.
So they have to tweet every 5 minutes, or within a 5-minute period, about anything. You know, are they hungry, tired, pissed off with me, need the toilet, whatever. Otherwise, you know, there's nothing there. They're dead, and nobody's dead. So, and so they do this, and then what we realised is in the early days is people would come to the point where you hand in the sheet of paper. And some people would say, my handwriting was written in the dark, it was all... But when you look at that first scribbled sheet of paper, and the one that they wrote half hour later whilst having coffee, they changed the story. Because they'd had a chance to think about what was happening and rationalise different parts of it. And what we wanted was the instantaneous, spontaneous impressions and thoughts, not what they were rationalising the next day. It's changed again. If you get two people together, one can bring, even the act of asking them a question about the experience will change the nature of how it's reported. And so, as an investigator, you have to be incredibly careful how you ask a question. You can't say, where did you see the ghost? Because you're already implying that it's a ghost. You have to also be very careful from an ethical point of view about how you approach a case, because you might want to demonstrate your expertise and go, yes, like a poltergeist that we did down the road. They may never have heard of a poltergeist, but Google gives them 5 minutes. I got this thing, set fire to things and pour water on things, and nuns appear, and there was no fear there before, but now there's fear. And so that changes the perspective again. Even the act of getting them to keep a diary of the events focuses their mind on the events, and you find that more events, more experiences are reported the minute you ask them to report experiences. Because, I give you an example. You go out to work in the morning, you come back and your refrigerator door is open. The first thing that the majority of people here will go, stupid me, I left the refrigerator door open, I didn't shut it. You live in a haunted house, you are 100% sure, you remember closing the refrigerator door and something else opened it. So you've got to be very careful about how you take testimony from a witness.
One more thing.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm just saying, as a journalist, I found too, that's how I started in all this. I would often ask, I found I need to ask 3 times. And so I might say, like, okay, so tell me what happened last night. Well, I came home from work, I walked in, and right there at the top of the stairs, there's this man standing, and then he's gone. And I'm like, okay. And then I would ask again, like, was anything different? Like, let's go moment by moment. Did you unlock the door? Like, did you smell anything? Did you hear anything? Did you see anything? And when they start to recall sensory experiences, no, I smell, oh, you know what, I smelled cookies baking. I think my wife baked cookies earlier today. Fine, just take me slower through it, and then suddenly more details come out that didn't come through because they might just feel silly and they're rushing through the description, you know? There was a man. Well, what did the man look like? What did you see? What do you recall? You know, he had a hat on. They didn't mention the hat the first time. And then I'll ask, and then talk about other stuff, and then later on I might ask like cleanup questions, like anything else you can remember? Was there a time period you might remember about it? You know, just something that's just getting them to more comfortable with me, and then to open up more and more about the details of that experience, because it's going to change, you know, over time. If you get it early, then that's your best bet.
It's so important, and Steve always talks about it, is to write things down when we do ghost hunting and everything, or have paranormal experiences. When someone comes to us, we always tell them, keep a diary. Maureen and I wrote these books. You know, really get these books into
You're plugging away, yes.
But when we write
Ron's got a new book out, by the way.
when we wrote both the Ghost Chronicles books, we try to, they're written in our own voice, so we try to portray them as accurately as possible. So when we sat down to write some of these stories, you know, we lived these cases, we saw them one way, but we went back and we listened to the video and we listened to the tapes, and it was different. So our mind does change things all the time. So it's important to record everything. On our team, the New England Ghost Project, Jim Stonier wrote us a program called, what's it called, Jim? The program we use for recording things?
Oh, it's our product, Team.
Team.
Yes.
Team, which is whenever anything occurs during a ghost hunt, it's reported immediately to base camp. So that is written in with the date, the time and everything else. So it's there. Because the farther you get away from it, you know, and the important part is though, okay, is that if it's reported and written in, someone might come back and says, oh, well, I remembered something else. I remember. No, you didn't. If you didn't report it in, it didn't exist as far as we're concerned. You know, once again, because of what Steve and Jeff said about being able to embellish things and say, oh, you know, I've got to make sense of it, so I'll add this, I'll add that.
What's actually quite interesting when you look at witness accounts is that what at first may appear impossible may be the witness's experience. There are quite a lot of documented instances where the witness, in complete darkness, will describe great detail about the facial features of the apparition, or they will describe it from a viewpoint that they can't possibly have ever seen. So they might have described the apparition that was facing away from them, and then describe facial features. And this is not unknown in psychical research, and it's one of the things that parapsychologists and psychical researchers are interested in. There appears to be some form of super sense of the apparition. So, for example, I've experienced it at Rosslyn Castle, where one of the investigators of our own team described a scene as they were experiencing. There was no apparition, but just a scene. Now, when we looked at where they were sitting on the plans, they could never have seen that scene. So we just, sleep like it not being office. The next night, people rolled around, and the next night, and there was a different person there. And we leave people there for the entire night, except for toilet breaks, so they're there for 6 to 8 hours. And the next night, the next person there described something incredibly similar to the first night. And we knew that there'd been no cross-pollination between the two. What they were describing was a scene that would have existed before the panelled wall that we didn't know was a panelled wall because it was stone rendered, and had only been there 5 years. So they could have seen the scene 5 years earlier, but they didn't see the scene then. And that was an interesting, why were they describing something that they could never have possibly seen or indeed know about? And they couldn't have been picking up on, as a parapsychologist that was with us, Dr. Kieran O'Keefe, has suggested, well, they were picking up on the fact that we'd seen the plans. Well, we didn't know about the plans for a month or two later. So for us, this panel wall was, we just thought it was a permanent feature.
Have you had something that has really frightened you at one of these?
So, did you, I got one ready.
Go for it, man.
I was in a town called Volcano, California, which is slightly larger than this room. Population like 87, like really like small. At one time it was going to be the capital of California, but things shifted in Sacramento. But
Volcano?
no, it's just called Volcano. So we were doing this ghost hunt event thing at this St. George Hotel, and part of it was to go out to this little cemetery in the middle of town, and we were leading a group of maybe like 8 or 9 people out there, and suddenly this figure comes stumbling up, and it's got a gun, and it's not a ghost. It is very much a living person who is offended quite a bit about ghost hunters being in his town. He's like,
No sense
you guys want to become a ghost tonight? Right? Like holding the pistol and slurring drunk. And I was definitely scared. But not so much of dead people, but of what that guy may or may not do. We quickly got out of there, and that seemed to be good enough for him, and no one got shot that night.
That's
Good thing.
nice.
Glad about that.
nice story.
Spoilers, I didn't die.
To make sure.
Yeah, it's good. I was glad he was armed and drunk.
Well, again, I mean, it's
Never
almost
good
a mirror of Jeff's, because we were responding to it was a city TV one, and it was a quite a well-known landmark public house in the north of England, and the landlord was fully cooperative, unbelievably helpful. And we took truckloads because it was a TV special. So we took everything. We even had the machine that went bleep. It's all it did, it went bleep. It was stunning for television. And we arrived, it took us 3 hours to rig. There was wires, duct tape, cameras, things on sticks, and the machine that went bleep on the table. The landlord's wife arrived back after we'd set up, very drunk, very angry, and didn't like us being there. Apparently nobody asked her and ordered us to leave. And we, okay, we'll pack up, that's what we'll do. We didn't pack up quick enough because it took us 3 hours to set up. And 2.5 minutes later, her time was up. And she started throwing solid glass ashtrays, knives out of the kitchen, the cash register at one point. One of our cameras has got some remarkable footage that looks like it's taken from the nose cone of a missile. And it levitated the entire length of the pub. That was a fairly Now all our vehicles were parked locked in the backyard of the pub, behind 2 8-foot gates. And the only way we could get the vehicles back out was ultimately to call the police. The landlord had gone. He fled. While this maniacal woman ran amok inside the pub, flinging and hurling stuff around. So we had to call the police. And we're standing on the curbside trying to catch as much stuff as we could as it came out the door. And one of our very expensive digital audio tape recorders back then came skidding out across the curb, still fortunately partially in its flight case to protect it. Skidded off the curb and landed in the roadway, just as a very large police van ran it over. And anyway, the police went in with truncheons and riot shields. And it went very quiet inside, and then they said, the police came out and said, she's allowed 2 of you to go in and collect the rest of the equipment. As that drew to an end, the policeman came out carrying 6 plastic supermarket carrier bags and said, whose are these? And she said, they're not mine, they must belong to them. So the policeman put them in the boot in the trunk of the car. We left, we drove down the motorway, we pulled into the first motorway services because obviously everything was in array, it was in the wrong cars, and we decided we'd take a drink, calm down, move all the stuff around, get it all. And we came to these 6 carrier bags. And in these 6 carrier bags were 34 car radios.
Oh, wow.
Would you pay for a new digital recorder? Obviously they were ours. And they'd been given to us by a police officer.
Once again, I mean, as you know, the 3 of us, from what our discussion, and what I'm going to say too, it's really not the paranormal, it's real people. And Maureen can attest to this, was when I asked her, invited her to the case.
Yes, I can.
You remember that?
Yeah, I do. When you can say, you can
No,
say
you do it fine.
not understanding where you're going to go during an investigation, right? To keep yourself so that you don't, trust in yourself, so that you're not Googling, right? So Ron called me up and said, hey, I have this investigation to go, and it was 10 o'clock in the morning or during the week. Can you go? And I thought, oh, how harmful could it be? You know what I mean? It's during the day. It's, yeah, sure, yeah, whatever. So we go there, and we get into this house, and there's these 2 guys, huge guys. I swear the guy's name was Moose. This big guy, all leather tattoos.
Covered with tattoos.
And one guy bring us in, and the house, like a ranch style house, was destroyed. There was mirrors busted in pieces, glass everywhere, broken, and all he kept saying was, "You gotta find out who it is. It's a little girl." I'm thinking, oh yeah, little girl's doing this, you know. And we were dowsing, whatever, but picking up, it wasn't a little girl, it was a guy. There was this man who was very pissed off, and I thought, okay, well, it's a guy. No, it's not. Okay, well, I think it is. No, it's not. Okay, that's fine, Ron, I think we gotta go. You know, so we walked around, we walked outside. Ron's still standing there with the moose in the man.
Yeah, moose gonna take
And
his side.
this other guy grabs my arm and walks me to the end of the driveway, and he said to me, "I want you back here." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "I really want you to come back without Ron." I'm thinking, oh yeah, that's it. You know? And he's like, "I don't know why you would think it was a guy. It's a little girl." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, but this is what I'm getting. And maybe it is. Maybe it's a girl. I don't know." And I'm thinking, just get me out of here. Say whatever you want. Get me out. And he said, "Because I just got out of prison for killing my best friend." So he had murdered his best friend, and it's a guy. But I don't think it's him. Okay, yeah, that's great. So he's like, "Come on, I want your phone number." No. And so I could see Ron in his eyes, like from far away. He's looking like, "Shut up, just get in the car and let's go." And I tell you, the phone was ringing. It was nothing, you know. And who knows if it's real or not? But the phone was ringing at the time, and it was all zeros. It was just a weird. It was a long time ago, and it was a weird situation. So we get in the car, and I swear, Ron just like all the way, "You better tell me you're not going back there. Don't be stupid." I'm thinking, seriously, I didn't want to go there in the first place. I mean, if I'd have known, it was this convict's house, so yeah, it was
Just got out of prison.
Just got out of
And,
prison.
you know, in all fairness to myself, I've been working out, so if this happened now, it wouldn't bother me. But back then, I was a little lighter. And, so
Yeah,
that was
Ron.
probably my most terrifying. You know, there have been funny things that happened in the investigation.
That's a book. Doing an event at the Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, which is amazing design. It's like this wagon wheel where a couple of guards could stand back to back in the middle, and you can see down the whole facility. Really well designed, and sound travels in there like nobody's business. I mean, every footstep just echoes forever. And so we're doing this event. We're trying to be quiet, and I was there with my friend Dave Schrader. And Al Capone has a cell there, which is not off this little rotunda. It's kind of at the end, sort of near the entrance, and well furnished and all this other stuff. And we had a bunch of pizza for dinner, and our stomachs are just, you know, which is great for EVP, because you're just like, I think we got a demon. Are there any spirits here? So Dave and I are looking at each other, and we're like, dude, I really got to fart. And so we walk out, and we realize it's going to echo for hours. Eastern State Penitentiary. And so we go out, and I see Dave backing up into Al Capone's cell. And I'm like, did you just, and he's nodding, and I'm like, move. And then, so Dave, Al Capone, and myself have all farted in the same cell. It's the only place where I echo throughout the entire facility.
For me, the funniest was only funny afterwards. It was one of our very first TV appearances, and it was done for Channel 1 television, the now defunct cable channel. And the cameraman wanted to do an RT shot, like an artistic type thing. So he stood in the middle, he had me stand in the middle and turn around through 360 degrees. While he walked, it's a cartwheel story again, while he walked around me. So I'm standing and turning around, slowly telling the story. He's walking around, being led by the assistant cameraman. And that's how the shot is. And we're in complete darkness, and there's lit by a handful of small candles dotted around the building for ambience. And I'm telling the story of the ghost. And I'm slowly turning around with the cameraman, tracking the assistant to make sure the speeds are right and everything else. And finished the shot and stepped away. And the cameraman looked at me, "You're so cool." I said, what? I'd done the whole shot on fire. said, "You are so professional." How didn't that hurt? I looked down, and the whole of my pant leg from my knee down was smouldering and as I stood first up, because it's metal and black, I'd stood on a tea light. As I then turned around, it was stuck to the side of the shoe. Burning. And he thought I was so professional and I didn't put it down whilst on fire until I finished the shot. We finished the shot.
Yeah, you stop and say, oh, by the way, your leg's on fire.
I know. One of the funny things, and there have been many that have happened to me, was we were doing this investigation at this place in Tingsboro, and Maureen and I were there, and
is that the sick dog?
and so Maureen and I were there, and I got her in this room, and I said, you know, I had a psychic here before. He said there was something going on over here. I said, so I want you to go by this window and tell me what you get, okay? And she goes over there, she's making faces, I don't know what the hell she's doing. I said, no, tell me, seriously, what are you getting? She looks at me and she says, smells like I looked down and I realized I had stepped in a I was coming from my ankle up in this
That's a demon.
I'm Joe Cambria. I'm the Vice Director. Greg Burkhardt is the Director of our group, the New England UFO Reporting Center, NEUFORC. A lot of people don't know about us. We sort of stay in the shadows and do our thing. We're basically UFO investigators. We'll be contacted by somebody, we'll make a phone call, we'll start talking. If it looks like it's something that's worth investigating, we get involved. What we try to do is find answers. Sometimes it turns into a hoax. Not too often, but it does. That's pretty much what we do, but the subject matter has morphed from just lights in the skies to, believe it or not, a lot of what happens at this meeting. It can be paranormal, unexplained, strange, high degree of strangeness. That's what we do. Right?
What we've learned is that many of these cases start out as people perceiving them as a haunting or some other kind of, or even religious experiences, all kinds of explanations, which they themselves are comfortable with because of their own background. And as we get into them, we realize that there's a lot more going on than maybe even they realized initially. We were looking at Massachusetts. This is something that I investigated back in 2004, December 12th. A couple living in Billerica have an apartment on the second floor. There's a patio that extends out looking toward the west. They see a bright light coming toward them. I'm gonna paraphrase what's here because I don't have any pictures. Two individuals, Robert and Anne, in their own words, tell the story here, but I'm going to tell you. They basically saw a bright light coming toward them. It was starting to snow. The object formed a bright light around them. And you know how when it's snowing outside in the wintertime, how everything gets very quiet when it's snowing heavily? Well, that's what they experienced on the balcony. Everything kind of got very quiet around them. And they're both staying out there. She's looking up, and this blue cylinder comes down out of the bright light around her. And he's standing right next to her. And he realizes that this is not going to end well. This doesn't look right. So he grabbed her around the legs. By this time, she was already off the ground. And he threw her into the kitchen and slammed the door behind her. They both fell on the floor. We asked her, when I was interviewing him, I asked him why he did that. And he said, well, I'm a Marine. In other words, he was trained to run toward danger, not away from it. So he was compelled not only that, but it was his girlfriend. He was compelled to do something about it. It turns out that he had a burn on his hand because during the process of grabbing her and dragging her into the house, a red ray had come down and hit him on the hand. It was as though they were trying to knock his hand away. The light goes off as though the craft disappears quickly. And they wake up from a stupor. The phone rings. It's his sister on the phone, and she's driving toward the house, and she's been desperately trying to call him and saying, "You'll never believe what I saw over your house." He says, "Oh yeah, I know exactly what you saw over the house." So now we have collaboration from somebody a couple blocks away. And we have a joke about this case. We jokingly say, "Can't you just see up in the flying saucers there's two guys?" And they're looking at each other as they leave, and they're saying, "No, you were supposed to put him to sleep. No, you were supposed to put him to sleep." And they're arguing as they leave. And they're trying to figure out how they're going to explain to their superiors how they messed up so bad. That's the case that we studied, Bill Rickett, in 2004. Yes, crop circles in New England. You've heard of crop circles in other countries. There's a lot of them in England, but we have crop circles here in New England. This was a corn circle in Palmer, Massachusetts in August of 2001. And it's on the internet. There was a very nice gentleman, his name is Scott Brown. He was a field investigator of ours at the time who lived in Palmer, very close, about a mile away from this incident. And he went over and investigated first quickly, and he wrote these words, which are on the screen, but I'm going to paraphrase again because I was there 2 weeks later when I was able to get out there, because for me it was a 2-hour drive. And there had been a bad storm between the time that he investigated, he took the pictures, and I got there. A couple who, they didn't want to contact anybody, but their kids said, "Mom and Dad, this story is all so weird, we got to tell somebody." And they contacted MUFON, a national organization, who then contacted us in New England and said, "Can you go over there and find out what's going on here? This is pretty weird." She described a light in the sky when she got up late at night, looked out the window toward the south and saw a light. From her point of view, that's where the story ends until the next morning when her husband comes in and says, "Excuse me, honey, but all those flowers you were growing in the backyard, they've all been smashed." I don't know what happened, some kids maybe. And they go out there and they look and they find this big circular area in the corn they were growing out there in a spiral pattern. Now this is not wheat like in England, this is corn. And I'm from the Midwest. I mean, corn is like broom handles. You don't bend corn stalks, you don't mess with them. They're really stiff. But yet there was a 20 to 30 foot circle created by something at the time, between the time that she saw the light at night and the next morning, and part of that circle had crushed her flowers, which she periodically sold on the driveway in front of the house. So she was pretty upset about it. And the circle was so strange that the husband had been asking the neighbors, and they said, "We've never seen anything like this before. All our years have grown corn." And it's not the kind of thing that kids would do. So when I went out there and talked to them, Mrs. Saucer reaffirmed that all she'd done is seen a light in the sky at night, and the husband had seen something the next morning when he went out and saw that the garden was trashed. And I couldn't see anything because in the in the 2 weeks since it happened, when I got out there, there had been a bad storm, and all the corn had been torn down by a bad windstorm. So he said, "I'm sorry, you can't see anything. It's August, it's hot, I'm going inside, there's lots of flies, sorry about that." So I asked him to show me I had some sticks and some string, and I asked him to help me identify exactly where he thought it had been in this field of collapsed corn stalks. So he goes inside, and I'm out there, and it's like digging through a pile of broom handles. And so I go down a couple inches, and I suddenly see this pattern in the broom handles, and they're all going in the same direction. And I cleared away an area, and I realized that the crop circle had been preserved by the storm, not destroyed by it, because everything around it had fallen on top of it. And sure enough, there was a crop circle, and you could see it. I mean, I have samples that I took inside the crop circle and outside the crop circle, and really, really strange stuff. For example, I don't know if you've ever pushed over a cornstalk before, but I have in my youth. So they have very shallow roots, and if you give them a shove, they fall over, and the roots are sticking up out of the ground. And that's the end of the story, because you can't bend a broom handle, right? Well, that's not what I found. What I found was that, imagine the plant is still, the roots are still in the ground, and the cornstalk comes up out of the ground about 1 inch, and then does a 90-degree turn and goes horizontal. And there are thousands of them all doing this inside the crop circle, and it's all laying down in a nice pattern. That's weird. There is no easy explanation for why all of these corn stalks would be bent like that at the bottom. And the stalks outside the circle were just normal corn. They didn't have any bends. It turns out that the family's daughter lived in the house, as you're facing the crop circle, she lived in the house to the right. And on the left was a house where a truck driver lived. And I went and talked to the truck driver. And it turns out that the truck driver has a slightly different story than the family does. He told me that on the night of this incident, he heard a lot of commotion outside. He didn't see a light in the sky. He saw a light down in the corn. It was as though somebody was in a car with their headlights shining through the corn. And he figured some kids were out there in cars and they were going to wreck the thing, especially his, because his cornfield was right behind his house next door. So he rushed outside, and there was the husband in the dark with no flashlight, quietly walking back from his cornfield in the dark with a kind of a blank look on his face. And when the neighbor called out to him and said, hey, you know, what are you doing? Did you see anything? He just walks right by him. And where does he go? He goes to the door of the house where his wife is standing holding the door open. And she's also got a blank look on her face. And the neighbor, this truck driver, said, that's the weirdest thing I ever saw. And yet the family doesn't remember doing that. Now, they're the honest, they're the nicest people you'll ever meet. It's not that they're lying. They just don't remember. And I didn't even know that story, that piece of the story, until I talked to the neighbor. It turns out that a couple houses down is the police chief. And he had a fight with the husband about the day it occurred, because he said that it occurred on a Friday night. The police chief said, I saw the light. I was outside my sauna, and I work on Friday. It had to be Saturday. So it sounds almost like it happened twice. And the second time, the police chief saw it and remembered it. And the husband doesn't remember the second time at all. When I was talking to the wife, she said, my daughter lives next door, said, you know, she said to me, there was a really bright light, but there was no sound. This is in the middle of the night, 2 a.m. And I said, well, how did she even know that anything was happening if there was no sound to distract or disturb her? I said, can I talk to her? And without hesitation, the mother said, no, you can't talk to her. And I said, okay, I was trying to be very understanding of her boundaries. And then she said to me the weirdest thing. She said, Greg, she said, you have no idea how difficult it is for me to talk about this. And I'm thinking to myself, all she said was she saw a light in the sky. So it's one of the things that I've learned in these cases is that sometimes it's the things that people don't say are almost as important as the things they do say. And this is a good example of that. We have never talked to the daughter, but I think she was directly involved in this whole thing. And that's why the mother didn't want me to talk to her. So my wife has a great way of describing these cases in general. I end with it like this. She says, these cases, Greg, they're always murky and unresolved. She says, I think that's a great description of these UFO cases. And she also says, you know, they always have a beginning, and they always have a middle, but they never have an end. You know, she never resolved it. I said, yeah, that's pretty much the way things are. If you don't like that, you're not going to have much fun doing this.
One of the most frustrating things as a UFO investigator is, as Greg said, you get to a certain point and all of a sudden the witness disappears, doesn't want to talk about it, moves away, and that's the end of it, you can't do anymore.
I've had people say to me, yeah, no problem, you can talk to my wife. The next day I call, boom, they don't want to talk to you, they don't want to be involved. They're just, leave us alone. Yeah, and you don't know what to do except honor their...
The Andreasen affair took place in Ashburnham, Massachusetts. Familiar with the state central, right up by the Vermont border. This case was investigated by a team of solar physicists, electronic engineers, aerospace engineers, telecommunications specialists, and UFO investigators. They developed 528 pages of data. We actually have that.
Here it is. It's the original documentation for the Andreasen affair, one of the most important UFO cases ever documented.
This is absolutely amazing. You're going to see some photographs that nobody has seen. Okay, January 25th, 1967. Okay, 6:35 p.m. Lights in the house blinked out. Okay, and for a moment, they saw 5 strange-looking small creatures approaching in a hopping motion towards the house. If I can, there's Ashburnham up in the middle, north. These are drawings according to Betty Andreasen Luger's memory of it. 5 strange figures start motioning towards the house. They went through the door.
As though it was closed, but they went right through it.
They went right through the door. Okay, and this wasn't Betty, this was her daughter also. Her initial fright, Betty's, was immediately calmed by an overpowering sense of friendship. Okay, she was taken out the side of the house and brought onto a small craft. You see right here, okay? She guesstimates the craft to be approximately 20 feet in diameter. Okay, it took off, accelerated, merged with a larger parent craft, in which she was subjected to an examination. Now this is key. This is the first time this happened. As part of her examination, a silver pellet was placed deep in her nose with a long needle. This started the implants, okay, that we all hear about in the subject matter.
This is very important because it's the first time anybody had ever identified that a pellet had been put up in somebody's head.
I can't read it all, there's too much here. Later that same night, Betty was returned home by 2 of her captors, okay, approximately 10:40 p.m. 8 years later, she waited 8 years, 1975, okay, she responded to a local newspaper story by the UFO researcher, Dr. J. Allen Hynek. He's one of the founders of everything we do. She wrote him a letter, no response until 1977. A 12-month investigation followed with extensive character reference checks.
Massachusetts.
Yeah, this is good stuff. Extensive character reference checks, 2 lie detector tests, a psychiatric interview, and 14 lengthy hypnotic regressive sessions that followed. Under hypnosis, Betty and her daughter relived a consistent, detailed UFO experience with genuine psychological reactions. The case has spawned more than 8 books, many articles, and the movie rights were purchased but never completed. Do you know what happened during that period? What movie came out?
Close Encounters. Exactly.
That, you don't stand a chance on something like that.
Both movies were going to be made, and Close Encounters beat out the Andreasen.
Not to minimize Betty and Bonnie Hill's experience, this was enormous. Her recall was such, Okay, this
Plus,
was,
she was an artist, so she could draw very well what she saw.
these are her interpretations of what the craft looked like. We're running out of time, I'll go through this. On the bottom of the craft were 3 or 4 of these crystalline engines. Okay?
I could push the button
Here.
when you're ready. This is a schematic that was drawn of the ship.
This is the ship that she was taken to. Here are the engines down below. Okay? She's in what appears to be a cleansing room, where they have her put a gown on, to the examination room. There's 8 seats here, and each one of them has a purpose. This is fascinating because this apparently is the drive system for these craft. And they're crystals, they're cut, faceted crystals.
She
Each
didn't
one of them
understand what
has
she was looking at, she was just describing it.
Yeah, each one of them has a disc. The disc is glass, crystal also, and it spins counterclockwise. Again, the recall that Betty has is just breathtaking.
Right.
Okay, for her to be able to do this. And also, most people who allegedly are abducted and taken aboard a craft have very vague memories of what's going on. They let her remember all this stuff and translate it. All right? This is Betty.
So this has not been published before, this is an...
No one's seen this photograph. This is just something we dug out. There's Betty, Joe Nyman, one of the lead investigators, and Jules Valencourt.
Jill still attends our meetings. Joe Nyman has retired to Georgia.
He's retired to Georgia.
I'm not sure if Betty's still alive.
We're just about out of time, guys. Okay, her description and drawing of the typical alien, small, rounded heads, no nose to speak of, slit for a mouth, no ears. Okay, this is fascinating. We've never seen anything like this. When she was on the table, they were waving this on top of her, and her interpretation was, what you could get out of it was they were trying to measure the amount of light coming off of her. Okay? Fascinating stuff. This is the room where I believe the cleansing took place. There's the robe, and again, she has her clothes here. She had to put this robe on and exit it. Apparently it was a sterilization chamber.
So there were 3 steps. First they put her in a room where they cleansed her. Then they put her in a room where she had to change her clothes. And then they put her in a chair.
This is a seat they put her in. A cover came down and form-fitted around her, and they filled it with a gel.
Completely. In other words, she had to breathe the gel.
No, some of these had ear tubes. One was for filling with a fluid. Again, her graphic recall is just absolutely amazing on this. And there was an air tube. So apparently what they were doing was putting fluid in so that the body could tolerate a fast ride in a very fast vehicle to get up to the mothership.
Now remember, this is 1967.
Okay? Nobody was talking about this. Nobody knew anything about it. This would have been an incredible movie.
And apparently the aliens would sit in the other chairs. So this is the way they sat when they traveled.
This is Betty's graphic interpretation of these creatures. She thinks those are actually what the aliens look like. We've never seen anything like this. This is new stuff. No one's seen this photograph before.
Somebody has matched these figures to the aliens you were looking at earlier with the almond head and the 3 fingers, and they said, that's a spacesuit. This is what they really look like.
That's what's in the spacesuit. Nobody eyes. Wow. You know, as an investigator, you see this stuff, and you just, every story is a little different.
Yeah.
What the hell do you do with it? Where do you go with it?
We hope you enjoyed this evening's slightly different show. In the future, we'll be sharing more of our featured speakers from SpiritQuest's past. Both Ron and I will return in the next episode. As always, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time on Ghost Chronicles Next Generation.
From ghoulies to ghosties, long-leggedy beasties, and things that go bump in the night. Deliver us, good Lord.